In 2024, college football would change forever. It was the first year of the expanded college football playoff, and honestly, I was so excited. I fell in love with college football when I was about 12 years old, and that was all the way back in 2013. The Missouri Tigers were my team, and during the 2013 season, Mizzou had a chance of going all the way. They ended up losing to Auburn in the SEC title game, but it was still a lot of fun to watch, and it felt like it really meant something. That would be the last year of the BCS National Championship, and in 2014 we would then expand to a 4-team playoff. Honestly, I didn't really care for it all that much, as it felt like it was the same few teams. I thought it was dumb that one conference was automatically left out, and I began to lose interest. When they announced that the playoff was going to be expanding, I couldn't help but be super excited, as I thought the future of the sport was very bright, and I still do. Now there are going to be a lot more teams fighting for spots, and more teams are going to have an opportunity to compete, and it was perfect. But there's one thing that I got wrong. I thought everybody was excited to see new teams, new brands, and new scenarios happen in the sport, but I guess not. Tons and tons and tons of people have been complaining about who gets selected in the playoff, and people are desperate and begging for it to be changed. Back in 2013, my Missouri Tigers would have 100% made the college football playoff and could have gotten that second chance to maybe win a national title. The other team I root for, the Indiana Hoosiers, where I went to school for a bit, ended up going from the worst Power 4 program of all time to making the playoff in year one under head coach Curt Cignetti. It was one of the coolest stories in all of college football, and I thought America was going to be rooting for them. But, again, they weren't. SMU jumped from the group of 5 to the Power 4 by going into the ACC, and in year one found a way to win. Boise State had a special season with Ashton Jeanty, and found a way to be the group of 5 bid. But apparently, people didn't like this. They would have rather had Ole Miss, Alabama, and South Carolina instead of Indiana, SMU, and Boise State. I was extremely perplexed last year, and I didn't understand why those 3 teams were getting so much hate. They were new, they had great stories, and wasn't that the point of expanding the college football playoff? I thought that's what it was all about. But not only was I wrong about it last year, but I'm once again wrong about it this year too. Nobody wants to see new teams, nobody wants to see the smaller brands, and nobody wants to see the smaller conferences compete anymore. It's all about the SEC and the Big Ten at this point, and it's starting to drive me nuts. This college football season has been absolutely crazy, and to me, there have been so many cool moving pieces, and so many cool stories playing out in front of our eyes. For example, in the ACC you have Virginia, who's notoriously been pretty horrible at football. In the Big Ten, Indiana is once again good. In the Big 12, you have Texas Tech, BYU, and Utah. And then you have group of 5 teams like James Madison and Tulane. Lots of cool stories, lots of cool opportunities, but instead of one of these schools, we need to put a 9-3 SEC team in. As I've looked through my own YouTube comments, Twitter, Reddit, and various college football platforms, all I've been seeing is that every single one of those schools should not get into the playoff, but a 9-3 Texas team should. I don't have anything against Texas. I thought they were a bit overrated being number 1 in the country after losing pretty much their entire team, it felt like. But again, they're a big brand, they had Arch Manning, and seemingly reloaded through the portal, so they're going to have a good season. They also started out playing against Ohio State on the road, so that was going to be a very difficult challenge for them. They ultimately ended up losing, and the game was rather boring, but still, it was a big marquee matchup, and a lot of people watched, and it was enjoyable. Texas ended up sort of struggling throughout the season, as they had a horrible loss to Florida, almost lost to Mississippi State, and got bailed out against Kentucky. Obviously, there's no harm in winning, and I'm not going to pretend that they didn't win those games, but just because Texas ended up beating Texas A&M this week, people are begging for the Longhorns to get in. A lot of people are upset that Texas decided to schedule Ohio State because that's the reason they're not going to the playoff. But this same stupid logic was used last year, and that's probably one of the last reasons why they're not going to make the playoff. One, it's because there's a lot of teams with better records and better resumes than the Texas Longhorns, and 2, they have one of the worst losses of any top 25 team as they lost against Florida. Florida is absolutely horrible, and it's just like last year. Ole Miss lost at home to Kentucky, a team that didn't make a bowl game, and Alabama got absolutely skull-crushed by a terrible Oklahoma team that only won 6 regular season games. The Tide also lost to the Vanderbilt Commodores, and Ole Miss also dropped a couple of games. Those are the reasons why they didn't make the playoff. Sure, on paper, Ole Miss, South Carolina, Alabama, Texas this year might have more 24/7 sports composite talent, or might have more draft picks in the future, but that doesn't mean they should make the playoff. If we are doing it based on that, why not just take the top 12 teams in the 24/7 sports database, combine their recruiting rankings and their transfer rankings together, and come up with an awesome 12-team big brand formatted playoff? Let's go ahead and do that instead of actually playing any of the game. I say all of that sarcastically, But there is a loud voice going around in college football that desperately wants this. They don't want to see Virginia, they don't want to see Indiana, they don't want to see JMU, and they don't want to see Boise State. They definitely didn't want to see SMU last season, and I truly don't understand this. Why are people watching college football? Are they watching it for the brands? Are they watching it for the excitement? Or is it a bit of both? I'm not sure about you guys, but I watch college football for the storylines, competitive games, close finishes, and iconic moments. When I'm watching two teams on the TV, I could care less about who it is. It could be Texas versus Ohio State, or it could be Virginia versus Duke. To me, as long as it's exciting football, what else really matters here? When it comes to the playoff, I definitely prefer seeing the new team. The best example is March Madness. Each and every year, there are a couple of no-name schools that pull off first-round upsets, and that is a huge reason why people love college basketball and why they would riot if they ever changed the bracket. I mean, why not just come up with the top 16 teams in college basketball and make them play? They're bigger brands, there's more talent, and wouldn't that make people happier? I don't think so. I don't know why the same logic is not applied in college football, and it seems a lot of the top media members in college football do not want the parity, do not want the excitement, and do not want change. I don't know if you guys recently saw it, but Ty Simpson was interviewed, and when asked about the playoff, he said every SEC team should be included. I know he's being a bit facetious there, and he's just trying to hype the conference and his team up, but I feel like that is a real opinion that a lot of people have. They just want to see all the top SEC teams play against the top Big Ten teams and call it a day. The winner of that bracket is the real college football champion, and all the other conferences and teams just sort of suck, and if they are good, it's because they beat up on bad teams, got lucky, or didn't end up facing one of the top schools. For example, last year Indiana plowed through their entire schedule and pretty much killed everyone on their schedule. The only game they lost was a road game against Ohio State, and man, you would have thought there was no point to those other 11 games, and the only two decent teams in the whole Big Ten last year were apparently Oregon and Ohio State. The other 16 of them didn't count, and if you beat one of them, you hadn't played anybody real. The same logic is pretty much applied to every conference, as unless you go on the road and beat a top 5 blue-blooded team, you quote-unquote didn't play anybody and shouldn't get a lot of respect. Sure, Indiana didn't end up beating Notre Dame on the road in the college football playoff, but the Irish got all the way to the national championship game, and Indiana's only two losses were on the road against Ohio State and on the road against Notre Dame, which on paper were number 1 and 2. The rest of what they did didn't matter in most people's eyes because they couldn't beat 1 and 2. That's what I feel like college football has become at this point, as I know a ton of people are giving crap to Ole Miss and Texas A&M because they apparently didn't play anybody either. To me, this makes no sense because apparently the SEC is the deepest conference in college football and all of their teams could beat anybody else, but when it comes to A&M and Ole Miss, they haven't beaten anybody. Make it make sense. A&M also went on the road and beat Notre Dame, which is insanely difficult to do, and the Irish are going to make the playoff this year, but people think they're only in the playoff because they're lucky, and they're not actually all that good because they lost to Miami. I don't really have a storyline with this video, as I sort of just turned on my microphone and started talking and started saying stuff, but man, this is really starting to drive me nuts. The people asked for an expanded playoff, we got it, and now everyone keeps complaining. Every year there's going to be a 9-3 SEC team that gets left out, and people are going to act like it's the biggest crime against humanity. If Texas really wanted to get into this year's playoff, they would have beat both Florida and Georgia. At minimum, they would have beat Florida. If they won that game, they'd be 10-2, and they'd probably have a spot in the playoff. It's really as simple as that. Yeah, they might have more talent than Virginia, but the Cavs ended up winning enough games, and they did exactly what they were supposed to do to get in the field, and Texas didn't do that. They lost more games, and they're the ones who chose to go to the SEC. They should have known the schedule would probably get a little bit more difficult, and it wouldn't be the same as the Big 12, so I have no sympathy for them. They took a bunch of money to go to the SEC, and part of that deal is you might lose a couple more games, and your schedule's a lot harder. Texas was also losing to plenty of teams in the Big 12, but all of a sudden now that they're in the SEC, those losses apparently don't matter. Again, I'm just sort of ranting at this point, but I enjoy college football for what it is. There's going to be 12 teams selected in this year's bracket, and no matter who gets selected, those are the teams that the committee deemed worthy, and I challenge people who get disgruntled about the bracket to just enjoy college football, enjoy the games that are in front of you, and try to appreciate it for what it is. There is no fix, somebody's always going to be left out, and there's always going to be some sort of metric that people use to try to justify it. Either way, I'm tired of hearing about the 9-3 SEC stuff, and I'm a fan of an SEC school myself. The conference is talented, the conference is fun to watch, and they're great, but they are just part of college football and not the entire sport. But what do you guys think? What do you think of the 9-3 SEC team debate? What do you think of the college football playoff format? And what do you think needs to change or stay the same? Be sure to let me know down below, leave a like if you support today's video, subscribe if you're new, and check out the videos on the end screen. Hope to see you guys again soon, but until next time, peace.